I'm Gurpreet Bhatia, DoD's Principal Director for Cybersecurity. Although we intend to speak accurately about the content of the proposed rule, the nature of oral communication means there may be a perceived gap. The written text of the rule takes precedence over all else. The CMMC program falls within my portfolio, and it's my pleasure to see the team's progress towards completion of rulemaking. Exfiltration from defense contractors is a problem that threatens our economic and national security. Malicious cyber actors continue to target defense contractors. Attacks focus both on large prime contractors and small subcontractors in lower tiers. Although DoD has had contract requirements that intended to address this for several years, the DIB has been slow to implement. In 2019, DoD initiated a move away from self-attestation security model. CMMC was created to provide DoD with a verification mechanism. We need to verify that defense companies have implemented DoD security requirements. We need to do this prior to award and ensure continued compliance during performance. In 2020, we relooked at the CMMC model and modified it to increase flexibility and reduce cost burdens, especially for small businesses. CMMC is designed to validate and verify compliance with DFARS 252.204-7012 requirements established in December 2017. The NIST SP 800-171 requirements, which were implemented in the 7012 clause, provide a baseline for the CMMC program and therefore not addressed in this rule, including the cost impacts. We're committed to implementing the CMMC program. The added emphasis it will bring to protecting DoD's information is important. We hope this overview will improve understanding of the proposed CMMC requirements and increase impact of the public comment period. It is important that we receive comments that clearly articulate your perspective so that the department can address those key concerns in the final rule. We must work together to enhance cybersecurity and protect DoD information from exfiltration. With that, I'd like to direct your attention to my Chief of DIB Cybersecurity, Ms. Stacy Boschanek, for more information on the CMMC program.
Hey, it's me, Stacy. The program is initially rooted in an executive order that established a program for managing and safeguarding unclassified information. That was the Executive Order 13556 on Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI, signed in November of 2010. The CUI program was then codified in Title 32 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 2002. In 2013, the DoD began implementation of the requirements in support of the CUI Executive Order and 32 CFR 2002 through the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, or the DFARS Clause 252.204-7012. This clause required defense contractors to implement NIST Special Publication 800-171 as soon as possible, but not later than December of 2017. In 2019, the DoD Inspector General issued its report on the audit of protection of DoD CUI on contractor-owned networks and systems. And the Navy also issued its Cyber Readiness Review, which revealed that little or no progress had been made by the Defense Industrial Base in implementing the CUI safeguarding requirements specified in the DFARS 7012 clause. Subsequent to this finding, DoD Secretary Shanahan directed the DoD to develop a process for validating that companies were in fact protecting DoD CUI. As a result, the Defense Contract Management Agency, DCMA, founded its Defense Industrial Base Cyber Assessment Center, or DIBCAC, and began to perform compliance assessments on DIB contractors against the NIST Special Publication 800-171. The department recognized that the government could not realistically perform assessments on the more than 220,000 DIB companies that handle CUI. The department also recognized that inconsistencies in the level of compliance across the DIB meant that DoD information was still vulnerable to exfiltration. To fix that, DoD developed the CMMC program, a mechanism to verify that defense contractors and subcontractors are implementing the NIST 800-171 security requirements in accordance with DFARS 252-204-7012 and are adequately protecting sensitive unclassified information as required by 32 CFR 2002. I will now turn it over to the CMMC Program Management Director, Buddy Dees, for an overview of the proposed CMMC program.
Hello, I'm Mr. Buddy Dees. As Ms. Boscianic stated, given the defense industrial base consists of over 220,000 companies, the department needed to create an ecosystem that could scale to support compliance verification. As noted at the top of this slide, the department and the DoD CIO in particular provides oversight of the CMMC program to include the designated accreditation body. The CMMC ecosystem is based on compliance with applicable ISO standards. Specifically, the accreditation body must fully comply with ISO 17011 standards. CMMC third-party assessment organizations, or C3PAOs, must comply with ISO 17020 standards. And the CMMC Assessor and Instructor Certification Organization, or CAICO, must fully comply with ISO 17024 standards. I would now like to walk through the key components of the ecosystem as depicted on the chart displayed on the screen, beginning with the two key government entities. First, the DoD CIO's CMMC Program Management Office, or PMO, out of Section 170.6, is responsible for establishing CMMC assessment, accreditation, and training requirements, and developing and maintaining the model and the supplemental documents such as assessment guides, scoping guides, the hashing guide, and associated CMMC policies. The CMMC PMO will set all the applicable DoD requirements associated with the CMMC ecosystem. Section 170.6 of the proposed rule addresses these specific CMMC Program Management Office responsibilities. Second is the DCMA Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center, or DIBCAC, organization in Section 170.7 of the proposed rule. In support of the CMMC program, the DIBCAC will conduct CMMC Level 2 assessments of the accreditation body and candidate C3PAOs whose information systems process, store, and/or transmit CUI. They conduct all CMMC Level 3 certification assessments and upload assessment results into the CMMC instantiation of the Enterprise Mission Assurance Support Service, or EMAS, database. CMMC EMAS is a government-owned database that will store CMMC assessment results and transmit scores into the Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS, which can be assessed by government contracting officers. Finally, the DIBCAC advises the DoD CIO CMMC Program Office on matters related to DIB cybersecurity and assessments. Additional detailed information regarding the DIBCAC's roles and responsibilities can be found in Section 170.7. Now moving to the non-government portion of the ecosystem. We will start with the CMMC Accreditation Body, or AB, out of Section 170.8. The day-to-day operations of the CMMC ecosystem are managed by the Accreditation Body, or the AB. At any given point in time, the DoD will designate one entity to serve as the CMMC AB. The CMMC PMO will directly interface with that designated AB. The AB will be required to complete a peer assessment in accordance with ISO standards to verify their competence in accrediting assessment bodies. In addition to ensuring ISO compliance across the ecosystem, the accreditation body's primary roles include authorizing and ensuring the accreditation of C3PAOs, overseeing the CAICO to ensure all training products, instruction, and testing materials are of high quality. You can review the rule at Section 170.8 for more information on roles, responsibilities, and requirements of the AB. CMMC third-party assessment organizations, or C3PAOs, are contained in Section 170.9 of the rule. C3POs are responsible for granting CMMC Level 2 certification assessments and issuing certificates of assessment for organizations seeking certification, or OSCs. C3POs must meet the DoD requirements set forth in Section 170.9, must achieve compliance with applicable ISO standards, and must comply with the accreditation body's policies for conflict of interest, code of professional conduct, and ethics. Like the DIBCAC, C3POs will enter the assessment data into the CMMC EMAS database, which will transmit the scores to the SPRS database. All C3PO personnel participating in the CMMC assessment process must complete a Tier 3 background investigation, resulting in a determination of national security eligibility. This investigation will not result in a security clearance and is not being executed for the purpose of government employment. Candidate C3POs are assessed by the government for foreign ownership, control, or influence, or FOCI risk. Those that are not disqualified based on FOCI risk will then undergo a DIBCAC CMMC Level 2 assessment before being authorized and accredited as a C3PAO. The C3PO must meet all the requirements for a Level 2 final certification assessment, but will not be issued a CMMC Level 2 certificate. C3POs are responsible for addressing all applicable assessment appeals arising from a CMMC Level 2 assessment conducted by their staff. Any appeal not resolved by the C3PAO will be elevated to the accreditation body for final determination. CMMC Assessor and Instructor Certification Organization, or CAICO, is in Section 170.10. Similar to the AB, there is only one CAICO for the CMMC program at any given time. The CAICO is responsible for training, testing, authorizing, certifying, and recertifying CMMC assessors, instructors, and related professionals. They also oversee development, administration, and management pertaining to the quality of training and examination materials for CMMC assessor and instructor certification and recertification. The CAICO must also meet the DoD requirements specified in Section 170.10, achieve compliance with applicable ISO standards, and comply with the accreditation body's policies for conflict of interest, code of professional conduct, and ethics. And finally, detailed roles and responsibilities for assessors, instructors, and CMMC professionals are covered in Sections 170.11, 170.12, and 170.13, respectively. Now that I have reviewed the key aspects of the CMMC ecosystem, I'd like to turn our focus to an overview of the CMMC levels. In November 2021, the Department announced an updated program structure that includes changes driven by public comments on the initial CMMC program. Key aspects of the model include elimination of 2 transitional levels, which streamline the model from 5 tiers to 3. Elimination of all CMMC unique security requirements. The restructured model now directly aligns to existing FAR requirements and the NIST requirements. Streamlining the process by eliminating assessments of the company's process maturity. Transitioning assessments against NIST SP 800-172 from C3PAOs to DCMA DIBCAC assessors. The current CMMC model incorporates contractor self-assessment, in some cases, the use of plans of actions and milestones, or POAMs, and flexibility for government program offices to pursue waivers for CMMC requirements. In addition, CMMC adds a requirement for senior official affirmations at each level. The senior official who is responsible for ensuring the DIB company's compliance with CMMC must submit an annual affirmation into SPRS. These affirmations convey that the organization seeking assessment, or OSA, has implemented and will maintain all applicable CMMC security requirements for the information systems within the relevant assessment scope at the applicable CMMC level. Please review Section 170.22 of the proposed rule for additional details on the affirmation requirement. CMMC requires companies entrusted with national security information to implement cybersecurity standards at progressively advanced levels, depending on the type and sensitivity of the information. The program also describes a process for requiring protection of information flow down to subcontractors. I will now talk to each specific tier of the model as shown on the graphic on the screen. For CMMC Level 1, contractors and applicable subcontractors are already required to implement the 15 basic security requirements that are specified in the Federal Acquisition Regulation FAR Clause 52.204-21. This is for the protection of federal contract information, or FCI. In CMMC Level 1, the contractor or applicable subcontractor is required to annually conduct a self-assessment against these 15 FAR requirements. The contractor or subcontractor must achieve a MET result for all 15 of the security requirements and submit the results into SPRS. POAMs are not permitted with Level 1. See Section 170.15 for details on CMMC Level 1 self-assessment requirements. CMMC Level 2. To protect CUI, contractors and subcontractors are already required to implement the 110 security requirements as specified by the DFARS 7012 clause, which are aligned with the NIST SP 800-171 requirements. The CMMC program adds a new assessment requirement that supports the verification of that all applicable security requirements have been implemented. As determined by DoD, applicable solicitations will require either a CMMC Level 2 self-assessment or a CMMC Level 2 certification assessment. The CMMC Level 2 self-assessment is performed by the OSA and is valid for up to 3 years. The resulting assessment score and compliance status must be entered electronically into SPRS. See Section 170.16 for details on CMMC's Level 2 self-assessment requirements and procedures. The CMMC Level 2 certification assessment must be conducted by an approved or authorized C3PAO and is valid for up to 3 years. The details of the assessment will be entered by the C3PAO into the CMMC EMAS, which then transmits the scores into SPRS. CMMC Level 3. For CMMC Level 3, contractors will be required to implement 24 additional security requirements selected from NIST SP 800-172. Details and descriptions of these 24 select requirements can be found in Table 1 to Section 170.14 of the proposed rule. The DIBCAC will perform the CMMC Level 3 assessment against the NIST SP 800-172 requirements. However, prior to receiving a CMMC Level 3 assessment from the DIBCAC, the OSC must have a valid Level 2 final certification assessment from a C3PAO that indicates all 110 security requirements from NIST SP 800-171 have been met. The scope of the Level 2 assessment must be the same as the requested CMMC Level 3 assessment. During execution of the CMMC Level 3 certification assessment, the DIBCAC may check CMMC Level 2 security requirements in accordance with the CMMC Level 3 scoping. If the DIBCAC identifies that a Level 2 security requirement is not met, the Level 3 assessment process may be placed on hold or terminated. The DIBCAC will submit assessment results into CMMC EMAS, which will then post the scores to SPRS. Now that we've reviewed the CMMC model and its associated levels, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Ms. Diane Knight, who will provide you with information regarding the implementation of the CMMC program.
Hello, I'm Diane Knight. The DoD recognized that this program was at a level that required its codification in the Title 32 Code of Federal Regulations to establish the CMMC program requirements. Title 32 of the CFR covers national defense and security. The DoD CIO, through the CMMC PMO, is developing the CMMC program rule. Concurrently, the DoD acquisition community is developing the corresponding 48 CFR rule to implement CMMC. Title 48 CFR is the Federal Acquisition Regulations System and includes the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations Supplement, or DFARS. The CMMC 48 CFR rule will incorporate CMMC program requirements in accordance with the 32 CFR rule. Rulemaking under 48 CFR is led by the DoD's Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment and is supported by the PMO. We anticipate the proposed DFARS rule will be published for public comment this year. The CMMC program proposed rule and supporting documents were published on December 26, 2023 for review and to initiate the 60-day public comment period on this proposed rule. To submit comments on the rule or the supporting documents, please go to federalregister.gov or regulations.gov and search on CMMC to locate the documents. Comments must be posted by February 26, 2024, when the public comment period will end. All comments received during the public comment period will be reviewed, and the comments and responses will be included in the CMMC program final rule. Both the 32 CFR CMMC program rule and the 48 CFR CMMC DFARS rule are required to implement the CMMC program requirements in DoD solicitations and resulting contracts. These final rules will be published on the Federal Register and include the associated effective dates of the rules, which we expect to be concurrent. Next, I'll address the clauses that are important for CMMC implementation, which are the DFARS clauses 252.204-7D12 and 252.204-7D21. The respective CMMC levels 1, 2, and 3 utilize the information safeguarding and security requirements previously addressed by Mr. Dees. That is, FAR Clause 52.204-21 for Level 1, NIST SP 800-171 Rev 2 for CMMC Level 2, which is also required for Level 3 in addition to the security requirements selected from NIST SP 800-172 for Level 3. DFARS Clause 7D12, effective since December 2017, states that unclassified non-federal information systems that process, store, or transmit CUI shall be subject to the security requirements in NIST SP 800-171. Those NIST SP 800-171 requirements are the baseline for CMMC Level 2 when CUI is managed under contract. The CMMC DFARS clause will require CMMC assessment to verify that the respective CMMC level requirements are implemented. Please note, even if your contract does not contain the CMMC DFARS clause, you are still required to implement all of the NIST SP 800-171 requirements when the DFARS 252.204-7D12 clause is in your contract and you process, store, or transmit CUI. The CMMC program will require an assessment prior to contract award. Once CMMC is implemented, DFARS Clause 252.204-7D21 will require contractors to achieve the CMMC level specified in a DoD solicitation by the time of award and maintain their CMMC assessment status throughout the contract performance period. Let me address flow down to subcontracts. CMMC program requirements will apply to prime contractors and to subcontractors at all tiers of the supply chain that will process, store, or transmit FCI or CUI. Please review Section 170.23 in the proposed rule for details on application to subcontractors. The CMMC clauses will flow down just as the DFAR 7D12 and FAR 52.204-21 clauses are required to be flowed down to all subcontracts at all tiers. CMMC requirements will be phased in, and that is addressed in Section 170.3 of the proposed rule. When the 32 CFR CMMC program rule and the 48 CFR DFARS rules are both final and effective, DoD will begin implementing CMMC program requirements as outlined in its phase-in plan. The implementation period will consist of 4 phases, which are depicted on the graphic displayed on the screen. During each CMMC phase-in period, government program managers and requiring activities will include applicable CMMC requirements in designated solicitations and resulting contracts. CMMC self-assessment scores will be submitted in spurs, similar to the way they are currently submitted in response to DFARS provision 252.204-7019. One reason for the phased implementation of the CMMC program is to ensure adequate availability of authorized or accredited C3PAOs and assessors to meet DoD's demand. Phase 1 of the plan implementation will begin on the effective date of the 48 CFR CMMC rule. In Phase 1, DoD will include CMMC Level 1 or Level 2 self-assessment requirements in all applicable solicitations as a condition of contract award. At their discretion, program managers and requiring activities also may choose to identify CMMC Level 2 assessment certification requirements in some solicitations. Phase 1 is focused primarily on self-assessment to provide contractors with the earliest ability to satisfy CMMC requirements. Phase 2 is planned to begin 6 months after the start date of Phase 1. In Phase 2, DoD will require CMMC Level 2 certification assessments by an authorized C3PAO. At the program manager's discretion, the solicitation may include the CMMC requirement, but specify that it applies as a condition of awarding an option period rather than at the initial contract award. In addition, program managers may choose to include CMMC Level 3 assessment certification in select solicitations where appropriate. In Phase 2, DoD expands the focus to CMMC Level 2 certification requirements to drive improvements in DIB cybersecurity. Phase 3 is planned to begin 1 calendar year after the start date of Phase 2. In Phase 3, DoD will begin to include CMMC Level 3 requirements in applicable solicitations. At this point, DoD solicitations will include a CMMC requirement when applicable as a condition of contract award, as well as option periods. For Level 3 only, program managers can delay the CMMC Level 3 certification assessment requirement to the exercise of an option period. Phase 4, or full DoD implementation, is planned to begin 1 calendar year after the start date of Phase 3. In Phase 4, government program managers and requiring activities will identify the respective CMMC requirements for inclusion in all DoD solicitations as a condition for contract award and as a condition for exercise of any contract option period. More information about each phase of the CMMC implementation plan can be found in the proposed rule at 170.3. A quick mention of a CMMC waiver. Government program managers and requiring activities may seek DoD approval to waive inclusion of a CMMC requirement in an acquisition solicitation. There is no avenue for offerors to seek waivers of CMMC requirements. Now over to Ms. Jen Henderson to address the next slide.
Hello, I'm Jen Henderson. The CMMC scoring methodology is designed to provide an objective measurement of a contractor or subcontractor's implementation of the security requirements. While it is generally not designed to credit partial implementation, the methodology allows for a limited number of requirements for which partial implementation scoring is built in, such as the requirement for multi-factor authentication and FIPS-validated cryptography. Under the methodology, each requirement assessed results in a finding of met, or not applicable. A security requirement is considered to be met if all objectives are satisfied, whereas a not met finding means that all requirement objectives were not satisfied. A requirement or objective that does not apply at the time of a CMMC assessment is considered not applicable. For CMMC Level 1, all requirements must be fully implemented to be considered met. No plan of action or milestones, or POAM, is permitted for CMMC Level 1. Therefore, no score is calculated for Level 1. CMMC Level 2, the maximum score achievable is equal to the total number of CMMC Level 2 requirements. Since CMMC Level 2 aligns with NIST SP 800-171 Revision 2, which has 110 requirements, therefore the maximum score is 110. If all CMMC Level 2 security requirements are implemented, the contractor or subcontractor is awarded the maximum score. For each requirement not met, the associated value, either 1, 3, or 5 points, is subtracted from the maximum score. The maximum score is reduced by the value of each requirement not implemented, which may result in a negative score. The point value of each requirement is reflective of the potential risk to DoD CUI. Unlike Level 2, CMMC Level 3 scoring does not reflect varying values for security requirements, as all of the requirements are considered imperative to improve the protection of DoD CUI against Advanced Persistent Threats, or APTs. Each requirement uses a value of 1 point. The maximum score achievable for CMMC Level 3 is equal to the total number of requirements. As mentioned previously, CMMC Level 3 aligns with 24 select requirements from NIST SP 800-172. Therefore, the maximum score is 24. For each requirement not met, the maximum score is reduced by 1 point. The CMMC Level 3 scoring methodology reflects the fact that all CMMC Level 2 requirements must already be met and a final certification obtained for the CMMC Level 3 assessment boundary. Assessment results for all CMMC levels will be posted in the Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS, and reviewed by the contracting officer and requiring activities. For more information on the CMMC scoring methodology, please refer to Section 170.24 of the 32 CFR proposed rule. Now that we've reviewed how the assessments are scored for each CMMC level, let's discuss the use of a Plan of Action and Milestones, or POAM, within the CMMC program. CMMC allows for limited use of a Plan of Action and Milestones, or POAM, for levels 2 and 3. It is important to note that not all security requirements are eligible to be included on a POAM. CMMC Level 1 does not allow for a POAM, as all security requirements must be met. CMMC Level 2 allows a POAM for select requirements. Requirements valued at 3 or 5 points, as identified in Section 170.24, are not eligible to be included on a POAM, with the exception of the requirement for CUI encryption. CMMC Level 3 also allows a POAM for select requirements as identified in Section 170.21 of the 32 CFR CMMC rule. Additionally, a minimum score of 80% of the total number of security requirements is required to achieve CMMC Level 2 or 3 conditional certification compliance. Finally, a POAM must be closed and verified by a POAM closeout assessment of the remaining not met requirements within 180 days of the initial assessment. If the POAM is not closed out within the 180-day timeframe, the conditional certification will expire and normal contractual remedies will apply. POAMs are addressed in Section 170.21 of the 32 CFR proposed rule. Another major component of the CMMC program is the standards acceptance allowance. To avoid duplication of efforts, thereby reducing the aggregate costs to both industry and government, contractors and subcontractors who have completed a DCMA DIBCAC High NIST SP 800-171 DoD assessment aligned with CMMC Level 2 scoping will be eligible for CMMC Level 2 certification assessment credit under the following conditions. Contractors or subcontractors who achieved a perfect score, which means no open POAM, from an eligible DIBCAC High assessment conducted prior to the effective date of the rule are eligible for a CMMC Level 2 certification assessment with a validity period of 3 years from the start date of the original DIBCAC assessment. Eligible DIBCAC High assessments include those conducted under DCMA's Joint Surveillance Authority and meet the aforementioned criteria. It is important to recognize that the scope of the CMMC Level 2 certification must be equal to the scope of the DIBCAC assessment. I will now turn it over to Ms. Diane Knight to discuss submitting comments on the Federal Register.
The 32 CFR CMMC proposed rule and supporting documents were published on December 26, 2023 to start the 60-day public comment period that will close on February 26, 2024. The DoD wants to receive your comments on this proposed rule and supporting documents. Please visit federalregister.gov and regulations.gov and search for CMMC to locate the documents. And please submit your comments by February 26, 2024, the close of the public comment period. You may post comments from either of those sites. Momentarily, you will see a QR code that, when scanned, will take you to the Federal Register website. I will now quickly review the next steps for the 32 CFR final rule process. The objective timeline for implementing contractor compliance with CMMC requirements has been and remains fiscal year 2025. To keep us on that timeline for completing the 32 CFR final CMMC program rule, at the conclusion of the public comment period, we will focus on completing the following actions. We will draft the final rule, update the regulatory impact analysis, the Paperwork Reduction Act statements regarding the required information collections, and prepare the final regulatory flexibility analysis, or FERFA. We will complete internal DoD coordination, Small Business Administration review, and submit the final draft rule to OMB/OIRA for review that may include interagency reviews. Following that, the DoD CIO, Honorable Sherman, will approve posting of the CMMC rule to the Federal Register. And then finally, we have to complete the Congressional Review Act requirements for a mandatory 60 days before the rule can become effective. Now back to Ms. Bostianic for her closing remarks regarding the CMMC program.
The restructured CMMC program refines the original model as Mr. Dees discussed earlier. It maintains the original goal of safeguarding sensitive information, but does so in a manner that reduces costs for small businesses and aligns with the existing cybersecurity requirements. The department took concerns from industry and developed the proposed CMMC program, which reduces complexity from 5 levels to 3, adds flexibility through the introduction of POAMs and DoD requirements waivers, limits costs by only requiring self-assessments for the 15 requirements mandated by the Federal Acquisition Regulation, mitigates Level 2 costs by allowing self-assessment in some solicitations, and limits requirements to the NIST 800-171 standard, which was already implemented in the DFARS 252-204-7012 clause. applies Level 3 to a small subset of DoD programs that require protection against our most capable adversaries, and eliminates duplication through explicit acceptance of other standards. Cybersecurity is essential to the basic functioning of our economy, the operation of our critical infrastructure, the strength of our democracy and democratic institutions, the privacy of our data, and communications of our national defense. The CMMC program is a key component to ensuring our national security. Improving your cybersecurity against evolving threats will safeguard the information that preserves our technological advantages over adversaries. Your cooperation is critical. We thank you for your time and attention. Once again, we encourage you to submit comments on the proposed rule and supplemental documents by February 26th. Only through submission of your comments will the DoD be able to recognize and consider your concerns as we develop the final rule.